My book is Self-Efficacy, The Exercise of Control by Albert Bandura. Now, before I was able to get into this book, I didn't really know what efficacy meant. It was never a part of my vocabulary. I probably read it in school at one time or another, but didn't really know the meaning. I'm sort of embarrassed to say. But so I wrote it down. It's the ability to perform tasks to the expected degree. So that made more sense when I started to look at this book more closely about cognitive development and the mediation processes, which we'll look at in a second. The mediation process. There's two things I got from the beginning of this section. One was spelling out cognitive processes. Is the mental process involved in gaining knowledge? How one gains knowledge? What's the process that it takes when people learn? Inferential thinking, the function of thought which enables people to predict outcomes from past experiences. I think as teachers, educators, we do that every day. A student has an issue in class or has a learning disability, we draw upon past experiences to be able to help that person perhaps predict a better outcome or a different outcome. If and it's not, it goes well beyond just with education and whatnot. That's why it's always important to listen to the older generations of people because they've lived through a lot and you can learn a lot from their experiences. Cognitive processes before I get into motivational pressures. Efficacy believes the effects of patterns that can enhance or undermine performance. Cognitive effects can take various forms. People who have high sense of efficacy take future time perspective and structure in their lives. Much behavior, being purposeful, is regulated through forethought and embodies goals. Personal goal setting is influenced by self-appraisal of capabilities. The stronger the self-efficacy, meaning the higher level you have, the higher the goals people set for themselves. If you have low self-efficacy, usually you set lower goals for oneself. And getting into cognitive motivational pressures, a couple notes that I took from this section. Some casual attributes of it. Success and failure determined from personal capabilities, meaning if you're a good athlete or you generally high achieving student, success is for the athlete is achieving good things on the court or on the field of play. Success can be measured in a classroom by getting good grades all the time. Outcome expectations, motivations based on outcomes from behaviors. And lastly, cog-sized goals. Motivations comes from personal challenges and reactions to one's performance. And those are sort of personal goals that individuals set for themselves, whether to attain a certain GPA or honor roll in school, or and the reactions from others. Sometimes your family members is what these cognitive science motivations tend to go towards. Also in this section that I looked at really closely is talked about anxiety and depression. This made a lot of sense when it comes to efficacy. Those who have a strong or a high sense of efficacy adopt strategies to cope with hazardous environments into ones that are more applicable. Meaning, if you have a high sense of efficacy, you can sort of overcome hardships in your life, hazards, roadblocks, and find a different way to achieve your goal. If you have a high sense of efficacy, you generally have a better sense of regulating your stress and anxiety, and those people generally take on more stressful jobs in our society because they can manage stress. Also, people have the ability to manage their own thought process and regulate what they think, thus managing anxiety is more plausible in most people. So if you have a high sense of efficacy, you can train your brain to sort of block a lot of stress and anxiety out and focus on the goal at hand. Now, if you have a low sense of efficacy, sometimes that leads to depression. Can occur through a low sense of efficacy of, I don't know, put down unfulfilled aspirations and dreams, or goals you never met. Um, I did say in this section that self-regulatory is possible if one is diagnosed with depression. There's different ways to deal with it: seeing a doctor, getting strategies from the doctor. Medication definitely is a strategy, I guess, and help regulating depression. And some have the ability. Some people that have low efficacy have a low inability to rid themselves of negative thoughts, and that's when a lot of times the medication does come in handy. Um, and also, too, if you have depression and low efficacy, you have a hard time sometimes dealing with relationships, family, spouses, work, and something that the brain needs to be retrained to deal with better, and can be. Development of analysis of self-efficacy, basically having a sense of self. If you have high efficacy, you know yourself. Outcomes that flow from action, you learn from your mistakes and you move on. Learning from failure is obviously the best tool to learn. Recognition and differentiation of self, accepting and appreciating differences. Everyone's different, and people with high efficacy acknowledge that, accept that, and embrace that. Evolution of human cognitive development. So I just made a few bullets because I was sort of stuck in one section, and I wanted to paint a broad picture of what Bandera talks about. So he kind of goes through the evolution of human cognitive development. Development of self. So at an early age, young kids start to develop self-appraisal skills. And then when they do that, children can then start to surmounting childhood adversities, meaning they can overcome things a little bit as a child. As they get older, they start to broaden peer groups, grow through transitional adolescent experiences is the next step. They start to become less of a child and more of an adult. There's that in-between teen years that you're not necessarily a child anymore, but you're not necessarily an adult yet. During these years, obviously, you start to understand your sexuality more. And then when you become a young adult, some people are drawn to more so because of you feel like you're invincible. Stages of the late teens, early 20s, high risk activities. Then through the evolution, you try to find fulfillment in jobs in life, and then fulfillment with family. And then you go through the midlife changes, physically, mentally, and then towards the end, you start to reprise with advanced age, and you go through different changes there. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, the evolution of cognitive development from Bandura. Now, this section got into some more cognitive functioning skills. Educational systems continue to change and evolve with time and the discovery of new challenges, meaning schools from the industrial age up into today, the technological age, have evolved and changed with the time. Sometimes not as quickly as the time, but they have evolved, particularly more recently. Schools have always been a time where its main goal is to educate, but also prepare you for the later years of non-school. Prepare you for the jobs that are current during that era. It also talked about how society pays for educational neglect, and that's very true. That's why we have, public funding of schools, because not all kids could probably afford tuition to private schools. And if there's a segment of the population that's uneducated, then we are going to pay. We as a society will pay for it on the road down um, later on with public assistance, perhaps generally low education quits for crimes, et cetera, et cetera, and that generally you pay for it later on, definitely. So, in a schooling system, we try to pay for everything up front. Also, I just put much of learning the chapter talks about is done outside of school with social uh, um, interactions with friends, peers, family members, coaches, etc. And good schooling fosters psychological growth and contributes to a quality of life. That's what good schools do. They don't have classes for that, but in generally speaking, you'll basically kind of saying you learn a lot of your lessons not necessarily in the classroom, but in the hallways, or in the lunchroom, or in between classes, or the social situations that you're put in on a daily basis in schools. Lastly, I just want to take a look at this interesting map that I took from chapter 6. It's a path analysis of patterns of influence through which parents and children's efficacy beliefs and academic aspirations promote a child's academic development. So basically, it's the goals of the parent and the child when it comes to efficacy and educational development, and how the different paths people can take. And it gives us a combination early on. Parents, put a good amount of value on education, and try to get their children to have the same values as the parent, and the different paths that is taken to adulthood. And that is it. Thank you very much.